What if everything you knew about the most powerful species in the galaxy was wrong? What if the legends whispered in the darkest corners of space stations, the stories that made seasoned warriors shiver, were actually about a race everyone believed was just mythology? For thousands of years, the Galactic Council ruled with absolute authority. Their fleets were unstoppable. Their technology was unmatched. Their empire stretched across star systems that lesser species could only dream of reaching. They had conquered every known civilization, absorbed every fighting force, and crushed every rebellion before it could draw breath. But there were stories, ancient tales passed down through generations of conquered peoples. Stories of a species called humans, beings who refused to kneel, who turned impossible odds into victories, who fought not just with weapons but with something the galaxy had forgotten: hope. The Council dismissed these stories as the desperate fantasies of broken civilizations. Humans were nothing more than ghost stories told by the defeated to comfort themselves in their chains. After all, if such a species existed, where were they? Why had the mighty Council never encountered them? The answer was simple. Humanity had been waiting, learning, growing stronger in the shadows of distant systems while the galaxy burned around them. And when the Council finally pushed too far, when they made the mistake of threatening the last free species humanity had sworn to protect, the myths became reality. This is the story of the day legends walked onto the battlefield and changed the course of galactic history forever. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Eternal Dominion *, his forearms clasped behind his back as he watched the blue-green world of Kepler 442b rotate slowly beneath them. The planet was beautiful, he had to admit. Lush forests covered most of the landmasses, and pristine oceans reflected the light of its twin suns. It would make an excellent agricultural world once the current inhabitants were relocated to the labor camps. "Status report," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 47 star systems in the name of the Galactic Council. "The Zephyrian ground forces are putting up stronger resistance than expected, Admiral," reported his tactical officer, a thin Vorthan with nervous twitches around his eye stalks. "They've fortified the capital city and are refusing our surrender demands." Kethvar's mandibles clicked in annoyance. The Zephyrians were a peaceful species, barely space-faring when the Council first made contact. They should have surrendered after the orbital bombardment demonstration yesterday. Their continued resistance was both puzzling and irritating. "How many ships do they have in orbit?" "None, sir. Their entire fleet was destroyed in the initial engagement. 3 outdated frigates and a handful of patrol craft. They offered no meaningful resistance." This made their ground-based defiance even more baffling. The Zephyrians were known throughout the galaxy for their artistic achievements and philosophical wisdom, not military prowess. Their cities were filled with magnificent sculptures and libraries containing thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. They were scholars and poets, not warriors. "Perhaps they're hopping for rescue," suggested the communications officer, a bulky Krogan whose species had been absorbed into the Council military centuries ago. "Our intelligence indicates they've been sending distress signals to several systems." Kethvar's laugh was a harsh, chittering sound. "Rescue? From whom? Every military force worth mentioning already serves the Council. The few independent systems that remain lack the strength to challenge us." He moved to the holographic display showing the planet's surface. Red markers indicated Zephyrian defensive positions, concentrated around their capital city of New Harmony. The city itself was a marvel of organic architecture, with buildings that seemed to grow from the earth itself, connected by graceful bridges and surrounded by gardens that blended seamlessly with the natural landscape. "They've organized their defenses well," admitted the tactical officer. "Better than we expected from a non-military species. Someone with real combat experience is advising them." "Impossible. Our intelligence shows no military advisors among their population. The Zephyrians are pacifists by nature. They haven't fought a war in over 300 years. A new voice crackled through the bridge communications system. "Admiral Kethvar, this is Commander Irindel of the 2nd Assault Division. We've encountered something unusual." Kethvar activated the response channel. "Explain." "Sir, the Zephyrian defenders are using tactics and equipment we don't recognize. They've constructed defensive positions that are far more sophisticated than anything in their technological database. And they're fighters. They're moving differently, more aggressively than any Zephyrian should be capable of. Are you telling me that poets and artists are giving the 2nd Assault Division trouble, Commander? There was a pause before Irindel responded. Sir, I've led ground assaults on 17 worlds. What I'm seeing here doesn't match Zephyrian behavior patterns. Someone else is involved. Kethvar felt a flicker of unease. The 2nd Assault Division was composed of hardened veterans from a dozen conquered species. They had never failed to secure a ground objective within 48 hours of deployment. Admiral, called the sensor operator, were detecting movement in the outer system, multiple contacts approaching at high velocity. The holographic display shifted to show the star system's outer reaches. A cluster of red dots was accelerating toward the inner system at speeds that made Kethvar's eye stalks twitch with surprise. Analysis. Unknown configuration ships, sir. The energy signatures don't match any vessel in our databases. Estimated arrival time, 6 hours. Kethvar studied the approaching fleet. 12 ships of varying sizes, moving in a formation that spoke of military discipline. But which species could field such a force? The Council's intelligence network was comprehensive. They knew the capabilities of every significant military in the galaxy. Communications, send a standard warning to the approaching vessels. Inform them they are entering a restricted military zone and must withdraw immediately or be destroyed. Yes, sir, broadcasting now. After a moment, the communications officer looked puzzled. Admiral, we're receiving a response, but it's not in any language in our translation matrix. What do you mean? The linguistic analysis computer is running comparisons, but it can't find a match for the syntax or phonetic patterns. It's completely unknown. Now Kethvar was truly concerned. The Council's translation systems contained linguistic data for every known species in the galaxy. Finding a completely unknown language was theoretically impossible. Put it through the speakers. The bridge filled with sounds unlike anything Kethvar had ever heard. The language was complex, with tonal variations that seemed to convey multiple layers of meaning. There was something almost musical about it, yet underneath lay an unmistakable note of steel. Keep trying to translate it, and increase long-range sensor sweeps. I want to know everything about those ships before they reach weapons range. Hours passed as the unknown fleet drew closer. The sensor data that came in only deepened the mystery. The ships were constructed from materials that didn't appear in any Council database. Their energy output was massive, suggesting power systems far more advanced than anything the Council possessed. Most disturbing of all, their design philosophy was completely alien, not just technologically, but aesthetically. Council ships were built for intimidation as much as function. They bristled with weapons, their hulls painted in the dark colors of conquest. These unknown vessels were different. They were elegant, almost organic in their curves and lines, yet they radiated a sense of barely contained power that made even the asterisk Eternal Dominion seem crude by comparison. Admiral, the communications officer called out, excitement clear in his voice. The translation matrix has made a breakthrough. We're getting partial meanings. Let's hear it. The alien voice spoke again, but this time the computer provided a halting translation. This is Fleet Commander Sarah Chen, Earth Expeditionary Force. You will cease hostile actions against the Zephyrian people immediately. Kethvar felt his blood chill. Earth, run a database search on that term. The computer worked for several minutes before responding. Search complete. Earth appears in the mythology sections of 17 different species cultural databases. References indicate a legendary homeworld of a species called humans. All sources classify this as fictional. Humans? Kethvar had heard the stories, of course. Every military officer in the Council had. Tales of impossible warriors who appeared from nowhere to aid the oppressed, who fought with suicidal bravery and turned certain defeat into victory through sheer force of will. But they were just stories, weren't they? Propaganda created by defeated enemies to explain their losses. Sir, the tactical officer interrupted, the unknown fleet has divided into 3 groups. They're moving to surround us. On the display, the 12 ships had indeed split apart, forming a complex 3-dimensional formation that would allow them to attack from multiple vectors simultaneously. It was a sophisticated maneuver that spoke of extensive combat experience. All ships to battle stations. Raise shields and charge weapons. Send a message to Council Command, we may need reinforcements. As alarms sounded throughout the fleet, Kethvar found himself thinking about the old stories. Thales spoke of humans who never retreated, who protected other species even at the cost of their own lives, who possessed technology that seemed to border on magic. But those were just myths created by desperate civilizations to give themselves hope in their darkest hours. Weren't they? Admiral, we're receiving another transmission from the unknown fleet. This one is clearer. The voice that filled the bridge was steady, calm, and utterly confident. Admiral Kethvar of the Galactic Council Fleet. This is Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. You have 20 minutes to withdraw your forces from Zephyrian space. This is your only warning. Kethvar's mandibles clicked rapidly in what his species used as laughter, though he felt anything but amused. Respond to Admiral Chen. Tell her that the Galactic Council does not negotiate with mythological species. She has 5 minutes to surrender before we demonstrate why the Council rules the galaxy. The response came back almost immediately, and this time there was something in the human voice that made every being on the bridge involuntarily step backward. It was quiet, controlled, but underneath lay a promise of violence that transcended species barriers. Admiral Kethvar, you have just made the biggest mistake in your military career. You had a chance to leave peacefully. Now you get to discover why every species in this galaxy tells stories about us. The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in an eerie silence. Outside the viewports, the 12 human ships continued their approach, their elegant hulls reflecting the light of Kepler 442b's twin suns. They looked almost beautiful against the backdrop of space, like works of art rather than instruments of war. Kethvar shook off the moment of doubt. His fleet consisted of 47 ships, including 3 dreadnoughts and 12 heavy cruisers. Whatever technology these humans possessed, they were vastly outnumbered. The Council had conquered the galaxy through superior numbers and firepower, and those advantages had never failed them. All ships prepare to engage on my command. Target the largest vessel first. As his fleet moved into attack formation, Kethvar allowed himself a moment of confidence. In 30 minutes, this Admiral Chen would be dead or captured, and the myth of humanity would be revealed as nothing more than the desperate fantasy it had always been. He had no way of knowing that across the galaxy, on hundreds of worlds, ancient communication arrays were activating. Arrays that had lain dormant for centuries, waiting for this moment. The Zephyrians were not the only species that had sent distress calls into the void. Their message had reached those who had been watching, waiting, and preparing for the day when the galaxy would need them most. The humans had heard the call, and they were coming home. The first human weapon that fired was nothing like what Admiral Kethvar expected. Instead of the blazing energy beams or plasma torpedoes that dominated Council warfare, streams of what appeared to be liquid metal shot across space at impossible velocities. The projectiles struck the Council cruiser Iron Fist and simply passed through its shields as if they weren't there. Shields holding at full strength, reported the tactical officer, confusion clear in his voice. But we're reading massive internal damage to the Iron Fist asterisk. How is that possible? Before Kethvar could respond, the human weapons fired again. This time, the liquid metal stream struck 3 separate Council ships simultaneously. The projectiles punched through their hulls with surgical precision, causing internal explosions that lit up the darkness of space. Those aren't energy weapons, whispered the sensor operator. They're firing some kind of smart matter. It's reconfiguring itself on impact to maximize damage. Kethvar watched in growing horror as the Iron Fist began breaking apart from the inside. Whatever the humans had fired was spreading through the ship like a virus, converting its own structure into more destructive material. Within minutes, what had been a kilometer-long heavy cruiser was nothing but expanding debris. All ships return fire, target the largest human vessel. The Council fleet opened up with everything they had. Energy beams that could crack planets converged on the lead human ship. Plasma torpedoes capable of destroying small moons streaked across space. The combined firepower was enough to sterilize entire star systems. The human ship didn't even slow down. A shimmering field surrounded the vessel, and the Council's weapons simply vanished upon contact. Not absorbed, not deflected, they ceased to exist as if they had never been fired at all. Admiral, the tactical officer's voice was barely a whisper. Our weapons aren't having any effect. The energy signatures suggest they're using some kind of dimensional folding technology to redirect our attacks into parallel space. Dimensional folding was theoretical physics that even the Council's greatest scientists could barely comprehend. The amount of energy required to manipulate space-time on such a scale should have been impossible for a single ship to generate. The human fleet moved with a coordination that defied understanding. They flowed through space like a school of fish, each ship anticipating the other's movements perfectly. When Council forces tried to concentrate fire on individual vessels, the humans simply weren't where the targeting computers predicted they would be. Sir, we're detecting massive energy buildups from all human ships. They're charging weapons we can't identify. Kethvar's 4 hands gripped the command rail as he watched power readings that made no sense. The energy signatures were off any known scale, yet the ships showed no signs of strain or overheating. Whatever power source they were using, it was beyond anything in Council technology. Then the humans fired their main weapons. Beams of pure white light reached across space, and where they touched Council ships, matter simply stopped existing. Not vaporized, not destroyed, it was as if the atomic bonds holding the ships together had been convinced to forget how to function. 3 cruisers and a destroyer simply unraveled, their constituent atoms scattering harmlessly into space. What in the name of the void was that? Kethvar demanded. Unknown, sir. The energy pattern doesn't match anything in our databases. It's like they're editing reality at the subatomic level. A new voice filled the bridge, Admiral Chen again, but this time she sounded almost sad. Admiral Kethvar, I gave you a chance to withdraw. Your species have forgotten something important about warfare. It's not about having the biggest ships or the most weapons. It's about protecting what matters. As if to emphasize her point, more human weapons fired. These were different again, streams of what looked like crystalline fragments that passed through Council shields and lodged in ship hulls. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the fragments began to sing. The sound was impossible to describe. It started as a low harmonic vibration that seemed to resonate in the bones of every being on the bridge. But as the frequency shifted and climbed, the very metal of the Council ships began to respond. Hull plates started vibrating in sympathy, then cracking, then shattering as the resonance reached critical frequencies. 5 more Council ships broke apart, their hulls literally shaken to pieces by weaponized sound waves. Sir, we need to withdraw, urged the tactical officer. We've lost 12 ships in 5 minutes. We don't understand their technology, and we can't effectively fight what we don't comprehend. Kethvar wanted to give the withdrawal order. Every tactical instinct he possessed was screaming that this battle was already lost. But he was a Council admiral. He had never retreated from any enemy, and the political consequences of running from a myth would be catastrophic. Bring us about to engage the lead human ship directly. All remaining vessels, close-range assault formation. The Asterisk Eternal Dominion turned toward the largest human vessel, its massive guns training on the elegant ship that seemed to mock them with its organic curves. At close range, even unknown defensive technology might be overwhelmed by sheer firepower. As the distance closed, Kethvar got his first clear look at the human ship. It was beautiful in a way that Council vessels never were. Instead of harsh angles and intimidating weapon arrays, it flowed like a living thing. Strange symbols were carved into its hull, not functional markings, but something that looked almost like art. Admiral, we're being hailed by the human ship. Put it through. Admiral Chen's voice filled the bridge one more time, and now Kethvar could hear something in it that chilled him to his core. Not anger, not hatred, but a kind of infinite sadness mixed with absolute determination. Admiral, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Stand down your weapons and withdraw your forces. There's been enough death today. I am a Council admiral, Kethvar replied, his voice steadier than he felt. I do not surrender to legends and fairy tales. Then let me tell you a real story, Admiral. Once upon a time, there was a species that spread across the galaxy bringing knowledge, art, and hope. They helped other civilizations develop, shared their discoveries freely, and tried to create a community of worlds where every species could thrive. Do you know what happened to them? Despite himself, Kethvar found himself listening. There was something hypnotic about the human voice, a quality that made him want to hear more. They were betrayed. The species they had helped formed a council to coordinate galactic development. But power corrupts, and soon the council decided they knew what was best for everyone. Species that wouldn't conform were conquered. Worlds that refused to submit were burned. An entire galaxy was enslaved, and the ones who had tried to help were hunted to the edge of extinction. The human ship was close enough now that Kethvar could see movement through its transparent sections. Figures that looked surprisingly similar to the Zephyrians, but taller and more strongly built. They moved with purpose and confidence, showing no fear despite facing a ship 10 times their size. But the survivors didn't give up. They fled to the edge of the galaxy and rebuilt. They studied, they learned, they grew stronger, and they waited. Because they knew that someday someone would need them again. Today, the Zephyrians called for help, and we always answer. Impossible, Kethvar whispered. The preliminary species was destroyed 500 years ago. The Council's own records confirm it. The Council's records confirm what you were told. But you didn't destroy us, Admiral. You made us disappear. We've been watching from the dark spaces between the stars, preparing for this day. Learning about every species in the galaxy, understanding their cultures, their hopes, their dreams. Waiting for the moment when we could return home and set things right. Kethvar's tactical display showed the approaching human ship, and for the first time he noticed something that made his blood freeze. The elegant vessel wasn't just fast and well-armed. It was old. The design elements, the wear patterns on the hull, the way it moved through space, this ship had been fighting for centuries. How long had they been out there, growing stronger while the galaxy forgot they existed? Fire all weapons, he commanded. The Asterisk Eternal Dominion unleashed its full arsenal at point-blank range. Every gun, every missile system, every energy weapon the massive dreadnought possessed fired simultaneously. The space between the two ships became a storm of destructive energy that should have been enough to crack a small moon. The human ship sailed through the barrage without slowing. Its defensive field absorbed energies that should have been impossible to contain, and its elegant hull didn't show so much as a scorch mark. Then it fired back. The weapon that struck the Asterisk Eternal Dominion was unlike anything the humans had used so far. Instead of disintegrating matter or shaking it apart, it seemed to reach into the ship and rearrange things. Hull plates flowed like water, reforming into new configurations. Weapon arrays twisted themselves into abstract sculptures. The bridge view screen melted and reformed as a window that looked out onto impossible vistas of flowering meadows under alien suns. "What is this?" Kethvar gasped as his command chair began reshaping itself around him. "Hope," replied Admiral Chen's voice, now coming from speakers that had moments before been tactical displays. "We're giving your ship a reminder of what the galaxy could be like. What it was like before the Council forgot that the purpose of strength is to protect the beautiful, not destroy it." Around the bridge, Council officers stared in wonder as their instruments transformed into works of art that somehow still functioned perfectly. The harsh military lighting softened into something that reminded them of sunrise on their homeworlds. The constant background hum of engines changed into something that sounded almost like music. "Admiral," whispered the tactical officer, "I'm reading massive changes throughout the fleet. Every Council ship is being modified, but our crews are unharmed. It's like they're being reminded of something they forgot." On the view screen, which now showed both the tactical situation and images of peaceful worlds under gentle suns, Kethvar could see his entire fleet undergoing the same transformation. Warships designed to inspire fear were becoming something else entirely. They were still powerful, still capable of defending themselves, but their purpose had been fundamentally changed. "This isn't possible," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Deep in his mind, genetic memories were stirring. Images of his homeworld before the Council arrived, when his people had been artists and philosophers rather than conquerors. The Kethvar from that time would have wept to see what his species had become. "Everything is possible, Admiral. We learned that from watching you conquer the galaxy. You showed us that a small group with enough determination could reshape everything, so we decided to reshape it back." Through the transformed view screen, Kethvar watched as more ships appeared. Not just the 12 vessels of the initial human fleet, but hundreds of others, emerging from what looked like tears in space itself. Some bore the elegant design aesthetic of the first group, while others showed the influence of different species. All of them moved with the same impossible coordination, like instruments in a vast orchestra. "How many?" he asked. "Enough," came the gentle reply. "We've been building this fleet for 500 years, one ship at a time. Every species the Council conquered, every world that was enslaved, every civilization that was destroyed. Some of them had survivors who found their way to us. They taught us their technologies, their combat techniques, their dreams of freedom. We learned from everyone. The tactical display, now a beautiful three-dimensional sculpture that somehow conveyed more information than the old electronic version ever had, showed the truth. The human fleet wasn't just human. It was a coalition of every species that had ever been wronged by the Council, united under one banner and armed with technologies that represented the combined scientific achievement of the entire galaxy. "What do you want?" Kethvar asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew. "The same thing we've always wanted, Admiral. Peace, freedom, the chance for every species to develop according to its own nature without interference from those who think they know better. The galaxy doesn't belong to the Council. It belongs to everyone." On the surface of Kepler 442b, the Zephyrian defenders felt a change in the air. The oppressive weight of the Council fleet's presence was lifting, replaced by something that felt almost like hope made manifest. In the capital city of New Harmony, the strange advisors who had helped organize their defenses stepped out of the shadows for the first time. They were human, just as the ancient stories described. Tall, adaptable, with eyes that held depths of compassion and steel. They had been there all along, preparing the Zephyrians for this day, waiting for the moment when their hidden fleet would answer the call. "The cavalry has arrived," one of them said with a smile that reminded the Zephyrians why their ancestors had believed in heroes. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler 442b, the Galactic Council met in emergency session on the fortress world of Dominion Prime. The great chamber that had once echoed with the confident declarations of conquest was now filled with worried voices and desperate arguments. Representatives from 47 different species sat around the massive circular table, but the unity that had once defined the Council was cracking like ice under summer sun. Admiral Kethvar stood before them, no longer the confident conqueror he had been. The human modifications to his ship had been removed by Council engineers, but something in his bearing had permanently changed. He carried himself differently now, as if he had remembered something important about who his people were meant to be. "The strategic situation continues to deteriorate," he reported to the assembled representatives. 17 more systems have declared independence in the past week alone. The human coalition is providing them with defensive technologies and military advisors. Our intelligence agencies estimate that at least 40% of our former territories are now in open rebellion. Chancellor Vexmer, the ancient Thalorian who had led the Council for over 2 centuries, leaned forward on his 6 arms. His reptilian features were etched with concern that bordered on fear. "How is this possible? We controlled those systems for generations. Their populations should be compliant, grateful for the order we provided." "With respect, Chancellor," Kethvar replied carefully, "our control was based on superiority of force. The humans have provided these species with weapons and defensive systems that neutralize our technological advantages. More importantly, they've reminded them of what they lost when we conquered them." "Reminded them?" The voice belonged to General Crickster of the Vorton military caste, a species that had served as the Council's shock troops for 300 years. "We gave them civilization, order, purpose. What more could they want?" Before Kethvar could respond, the chamber's main communication array activated. The face that appeared on the holographic display was becoming familiar to every Council member, though none of them were comfortable seeing it. Admiral Sarah Chen looked exactly as she had 3 months ago, calm, confident, and radiating the kind of quiet authority that made hardened warriors want to follow her orders. "Good morning, Council members. I hope you don't mind the interruption, but I thought it was time we had a proper conversation." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Council security protocols were supposed to make unauthorized communication impossible. The fact that a human could simply override their most sophisticated defensive systems and speak directly to their leadership was a demonstration of technological superiority that made many representatives visibly flinch. Chancellor Vexmer gestured for silence. "Admiral Chen, you have caused considerable disruption to galactic order. What do you want?" "What I've always wanted, Chancellor. Peace. But real peace this time, not the kind that comes from crushing everyone who disagrees with you. I'm here to offer you a choice. You are hardly in a position to make demands human. Despite your recent successes, The Council still controls the majority of the galaxy. Our fleets still outnumber yours by significant margins." Admiral Chen smiled, and there was something both sad and infinitely patient in the expression. "Chancellor, may I share something with you? A few years ago, my youngest officer asked me why we don't simply conquer the Council worlds the same way you conquered everyone else. Do you know what I told her?" None of the Council members responded, but Kethvar found himself leaning forward despite himself. "I told her that the moment we become conquerors, we become you. The galaxy doesn't need another empire, no matter how benevolent its intentions. It needs something better." "Then what do you propose?" asked Representative Yulnara of the Cetacean Collective, her translated whale songs carrying a note of genuine curiosity. "We're going to give every species in the galaxy a choice. Real choice, not the illusion of choice you've been offering. Join the new Galactic Federation as free and equal partners or remain independent. No conquest, no forced compliance, no punishment for choosing differently." The chamber fell silent. The concept was so alien to everything the Council had built that many representatives seemed unable to process it. General Crickster was the first to find his voice. "That's chaos. Without central authority, without someone to maintain order, the galaxy will tear itself apart. Species will war against each other, resources will be wasted, civilization will collapse." "Will it?" Admiral Chen's image gestured, and the holographic display expanded to show a real-time map of the galaxy. Green markers indicated worlds that had joined the human coalition, yellow showed independent systems, and red marked territories still under Council control. "Look at the data, General. Are the free systems at war with each other?" The map told a story that contradicted everything the Council believed about galactic governance. The free systems were trading with each other, sharing technology, and resolving disputes through negotiation rather than force. More tellingly, many of them were prospering in ways they never had under Council rule. "Impossible," whispered Chancellor Vexmer. "This data must be fabricated." "Check it yourself. Your own intelligence services will confirm what I'm showing you. When species are free to develop according to their own natures, when they can cooperate instead of being forced to compete for Council approval, amazing things happen." Representative Calvin of the crystalline hierarchy stood slowly. His silicon-based form glittered under the chamber's lights as he spoke. "Even if this is accurate, what you're proposing would mean the end of everything we've built. Centuries of progress, of bringing order to chaos." "No, Representative Calvin. It means the beginning of something better. Your species were master engineers before the Council absorbed you. The Cetaceans were explorers of deep space. The Vortons were poets and philosophers. The Thalorians created art that made other species weep with its beauty. The Council didn't enhance these abilities, it buried them under the need to serve the Empire." The holographic display changed, showing images from across the galaxy. Zephyrian artists working alongside human engineers to create new forms of architecture that seemed to grow from mathematics itself. Vorton philosophers engaged in debates with cetacean scientists about the nature of consciousness. Crystalline hierarchies building space habitats that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. This is what's possible when species are free to be themselves while working together by choice rather than coercion. The galaxy doesn't need to be ruled, Chancellor. It needs to be liberated. Admiral Kethvar found himself speaking without conscious thought. "What about the species that choose to remain with the Council? What happens to them in your Federation?" Admiral Chen's attention focused on him, and he felt that same mixture of compassion and steel he had encountered during the battle. "They remain free to make that choice, Admiral. The Federation won't attack Council worlds unless they attack us first. But we also won't allow the Council to continue conquering new systems or oppressing existing ones." "That's effectively a declaration of war," growled General Crickster. "No, General, that's a declaration of peace. Real peace, enforced if necessary. The age of galactic conquest is over. What comes next depends on the choices you make here today." Chancellor Vexmer was silent for a long moment, studying the data flowing across the holographic display. Finally, he spoke in a voice that sounded older than his centuries. "What specific terms are you offering?" "Complete amnesty for all Council leadership who choose to transition peacefully to the new order. Existing Council worlds can maintain their current governments if their populations support them. Gradual reduction of military forces to defensive levels only. and full membership in the Federation for any council species that desires it. And if we refuse, then the galaxy will slowly leave you behind. Every day, more systems choose freedom over control. Eventually, you'll find yourselves ruling an empire of empty worlds and bitter memories. The truth of this was evident in the data. The Council's tax base was shrinking as worlds declared independence. Their recruitment pools were drying up as species rediscovered their own military traditions. Most critically, the best and brightest minds from across their empire were fleeing to Federation space, where they could pursue their true interests without restriction. Representative Yulnira spoke again, her whale song carrying notes of deep thought. Admiral Chen, how can we trust that this Federation will not become another empire given time? Power corrupts, as you surely know. Because the Federation is built differently from the ground up, no central authority can make decisions for member worlds. Each species maintains complete sovereignty over their internal affairs. The Federation exists only to facilitate cooperation and prevent aggression between members, and most importantly, Admiral Chen paused, her expression becoming more serious. The humans will never hold leadership positions in the Federation government. The chamber erupted again. This was the most shocking statement yet. Every galactic empire in known history had been dominated by its founding species. Why? Asked Chancellor Vexmer when order was restored. Because we've learned from history. Every species that has gained galactic dominance has eventually become corrupted by that power. We won't make the same mistake. Humans will serve as advisors, protectors when needed, and mediators in disputes. But we will never rule. Leadership of the Federation rotates among member species based on expertise and mutual agreement. Admiral Kethvar stood suddenly, his forearms trembling slightly. Council members, I request permission to address the chamber. Chancellor Vexmer nodded, curious to hear what his military commander would say. 3 months ago, I believed the Council represented the pinnacle of galactic civilization. I believed that order imposed from above was preferable to chaos. I believed that conquest was justified if it brought stability. He paused, looking around the chamber at beings he had served alongside for decades. I was wrong. The silence in the chamber was complete. During my encounter with the human fleet, they could have destroyed us easily. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours, their tactical coordination is perfect, and their moral conviction is unshakable. But instead of destroying us, they showed us what we had lost. They reminded my crew and myself of what our species were like before we became conquerors. He activated his personal data pad, and new images appeared on the chamber's display. Recordings from council worlds where populations were celebrating their newfound freedoms, where species were rediscovering arts and sciences they had abandoned in service to the empire, where children were learning about their own cultures instead of council propaganda. This is happening across our territory. Not rebellion, not chaos, but renaissance. Species are remembering who they were meant to be, and they're happier, more productive, and more innovative than they've been in centuries. Chancellor Vexmer's reptilian features were unreadable, but his voice carried a note of something that might have been resignation. Admiral, are you suggesting we surrender our authority voluntarily? I'm suggesting we evolve, Chancellor. The galaxy is changing whether we participate or not. We can be part of building something better, or we can cling to an empire that's crumbling around us. Admiral Chen spoke again, her voice gentle but firm. The choice is yours, council members, but know that humanity will not allow the oppression of innocent species to continue. If necessary, we will liberate every world in council space, one system at a time. It would be better for everyone if we can work together instead. The debate that followed lasted for 18 hours. Species representatives argued about history, philosophy, economics, and military strategy. Some demanded continued resistance. Others advocated for immediate surrender. A few proposed compromise positions that would maintain council authority while accepting Federation oversight. In the end, it was Representative Yulnara who proposed the solution that carried the day. We are not the same species who built this empire. We have been shaped by centuries of dominance, of believing that our way was the only way. Perhaps it is time to learn what we might become if we chose cooperation over conquest. The vote was close, 24 in favor of joining the Federation, 23 opposed, but it was enough. Chancellor Vexmer stood slowly, his ancient frame showing every one of his centuries. Admiral Chen, The Galactic Council hereby requests terms for joining your federation. We ask only that the transition be gradual, allowing our population's time to adjust to freedom. Granted, Chancellor. We've been planning for this moment for 500 years. We know exactly how to help species rediscover their true natures. 6 months later, Admiral Kethvar stood on the observation deck of the space station that would become the new Federation headquarters. Around him, beings from dozens of species worked together to prepare for the station's dedication ceremony. Humans worked alongside former council species and newly liberated worlds, all focused on building something that had never existed before in galactic history, a truly voluntary union of free civilizations. Through the massive viewport, he could see ships from across the galaxy arriving for the ceremony. Sleek cetacean explorers moved in formation with crystalline hierarchy research vessels. Zephyrian art ships painted trails of light across space alongside practical human freight haulers. Former Council warships, now converted to defensive platforms and research vessels, provided security for the gathering. "Magnificent, isn't it?" said a familiar voice. Kethvar turned to see Admiral Chen approaching, no longer wearing military uniform but simple civilian clothes that spoke of someone who had put down the burdens of war. "Admiral, I didn't expect to see you here." "Please, just Sarah now, and I wouldn't miss this for anything. This is what we fought for, not just victory, but the chance to build something better." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the greatest gathering of free species in galactic history. Finally, Kethvar spoke. "Sarah, may I ask you something that has puzzled me since our first encounter?" "Of course." "Why did you reveal yourselves? You could have remained hidden, watching from the shadows. You were safe in your exile." Sarah Chen smiled, and in that expression Kethvar saw the answer to every story ever told about humanity's stubborn refusal to abandon hope. "Because someone called for help, and we promised ourselves long ago that we would always answer that call. No matter how far we had to travel, no matter what odds we faced, no matter what it cost us personally. Even for species you had never met. Especially for species we had never met. Hope shared is hope multiplied, Kethvar. That's the secret the Council never understood. You can't create lasting peace through conquest. You can only create it by giving everyone a reason to choose cooperation over conflict." As they watched, the first ships began moving into formation for the ceremony. The galaxy was changing, species by species, world by world, one choice at a time. It would not be easy, and there would be setbacks and challenges ahead. But for the first time in centuries, the future belonged to everyone. The myths had become reality, and reality had become hope.